Ambassador Thilla had never felt so small in her entire life. She stood in the center of Earth's orbital command station, surrounded by humans who towered over her delicate insectoid frame. Her forearms were pressed tightly against her thorax in the traditional posture of supplication. Her compound eyes reflected the dozens of human faces staring back at her from the circular council chamber. She had rehearsed this speech 1,000 times during the long journey from Valari space. She had prepared arguments, statistics, and emotional appeals, but now that she stood here, in front of the species that had quietly built an empire while the rest of the galaxy ignored them, all her carefully prepared words felt meaningless. "Please," she said, and her translator converted her clicking speech into human words. "We are dying." Admiral Chen Wei leaned forward in his chair. He was an older human with gray hair and deep lines around his eyes. Thilla had learned to read human expressions during her diplomatic training, and she saw something in his face that surprised her. It was not pity. It was not indifference. It was recognition. "Tell us everything," he said. So Thilla told them. She told them about the Krath swarm. She described how they had appeared from the dark spaces between stars 8 months ago. Billions of them packed into ships that looked like twisted metal hives. She explained that the Krath did not communicate, did not negotiate, did not accept surrender. They simply consumed. She told them about the 17 colony worlds that had fallen. 3 billion Valari citizens harvested like crops. The lucky ones died quickly. The unlucky ones were taken alive, their bodies used as incubators for Krath larvae. She described the distress signals that had gone silent one by one, each representing another world devoured. "The Valari hegemony has existed for 6,000 years, Thilla said. "In all that time we have never built a warship. We believed that intelligence would always triumph over violence. We believed that any species capable of crossing the stars would be beyond such primitive behavior." She paused, and her voice cracked with emotion that her translator faithfully conveyed. "We were fools." The council chamber was silent. Thilla could hear the soft hum of the station's life support systems, the distant sounds of human activity beyond the sealed doors. "We have tried to fight," she continued. "We have armed our civilian ships with mining lasers and cargo bay doors modified to drop rocks. We have sacrificed millions of our people in hopeless battles. But we are not warriors. We do not know how to fight a war." She looked directly at Admiral Chen. "Humanity does." The Admiral did not respond immediately. He exchanged glances with the other humans seated around the chamber. Thilla had done her research on human body language, but she could not read what passed between them. Their faces were carefully controlled, revealing nothing. "The Valari hegemony formally requests military assistance from the United Earth government," Thilla said, reciting the words she had been authorized to speak. "We offer full trading rights, technological exchange, and permanent alliance. We offer everything we have. We simply ask that you help us survive." Admiral Chen stood up slowly. He walked to the window that dominated one wall of the chamber, looking out at the blue and white sphere of Earth below. "Ambassador, do you know why humanity has stayed neutral in galactic affairs for the past 60 years? Thilla had wondered about this. Humanity had burst onto the galactic scene with startling speed, establishing colonies and trade routes within decades. And then, suddenly, they had stopped expanding. They had withdrawn to their own territory and focused inward. "We assumed you were content with what you had," she said carefully. The Admiral laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "We were building." He turned back to face her, and now Thilla could see something in his eyes that made her compound hearts beat faster. It was not arrogance. It was not cruelty. It was the look of someone who had been waiting for something, and that something had finally arrived. 63 years ago, humanity fought its first and only interstellar war. Our enemy was a species called the Rethki. They believed that younger species should serve older ones, and they decided to make humanity their servants. The war lasted 4 years. He paused. "We do not discuss what we did to end it. The Rethki no longer exist. Their homeworld is a burnt cinder orbiting a star that the rest of the galaxy refuses to name. After that war, humanity made a decision. We would never be weak again. We would never be caught unprepared. And we would never, ever start a fight." Admiral Chen walked back to his seat and sat down heavily. "But Ambassador, you are asking us to finish one." The council debated for 3 hours. Thilla waited outside the chamber, her anxiety growing with each passing minute. She had heard stories about human democracy, about how they argued and discussed and voted on everything. It seemed like a terribly inefficient way to make decisions, especially when billions of lives hung in the balance. Finally, the doors opened, and a young human officer escorted her back inside. Admiral Chen was standing at the center of the room. His face was grave, but his shoulders were squared with resolution. The United Earth government has agreed to provide military assistance to the Valari hegemony, he announced. Tilla felt her legs weaken with relief. Thank you. Thank you so much. How many ships will you send? When can they depart? The Krath Vanguard is already moving toward our core worlds. We have perhaps 2 weeks before they reach our homeworld. We are sending 1 ship, the Admiral said. Tilla stopped speaking mid-sentence. Her translator made a confused clicking sound as it tried to process her sudden silence. 1 ship? She finally managed. 1 ship. Tilla felt her relief turn to ash in her mouth. 1 ship. Against an armada of 10,000. Against an enemy that had destroyed 17 worlds. Against the Krath swarm that had turned 3 billion of her people into food and breeding chambers. 1 ship. Admiral, she said, struggling to keep her voice calm. I do not think you understand the scale of the threat. The Krath have 10,000 vessels. They have billions of soldiers. They do not stop. They do not retreat. They do not die until every last one of them is destroyed. 1 ship, no matter how powerful, cannot possibly. Ambassador. The Admiral's voice was quiet but firm. I understand your concern, but I need you to trust me. The ship we are sending is not an ordinary vessel. He gestured to one of his aides, who activated a holographic display in the center of the room. An image appeared, but it was so large that it took Tilla several seconds to understand what she was seeing. It was a ship, but it was unlike any ship she had ever seen. It was massive. The scale indicator on the hologram told her it was 12 kilometers long and nearly 3 kilometers wide at its broadest point. It bristled with weapons that her translator could not identify. Its hull was covered with armor plating that looked thick enough to withstand a small moon impact, and painted on its side, in letters that her translator rendered as UES Thermopylae, was the image of a human warrior holding a spear and shield. This is the Thermopylae, Admiral Chen said. She is the flagship of Earth's defense fleet. She has a crew of 45,000. She carries enough weapons to sterilize a planet and enough supplies to operate independently for 3 years. She has never lost a battle. Tilla stared at the hologram. The ship was impressive, certainly, but it was still 1 ship. Admiral, I appreciate the gesture, but it is not a gesture, Ambassador. The Admiral's voice hardened. The Thermopylae is not a symbol or a token. She is a promise. When humanity sends the Thermopylae, we are telling the galaxy that we will not stop fighting until the job is done. Other fleets are being mobilized as we speak, but they will take time to assemble. The Thermopylae will arrive first. She will hold the line until reinforcements arrive. He stepped closer to Tilla, and his voice softened. Do you know what Thermopylae means, Ambassador? She shook her head. It was a battle, thousands of years ago on Earth. 300 warriors faced an army of hundreds of thousands. They knew they could not win. They fought anyway. They held a narrow passage for 3 days, buying time for their people to prepare defenses. They all died, but their sacrifice saved their civilization. The Admiral's eyes met hers. That is what the name means, Ambassador. It means we will stand between your people and the darkness. It means we will fight until we cannot fight anymore. And it means that whatever comes, your people will not face it alone. Tilla did not know what to say. She had expected politics, negotiations, discussions about payment and treaties. She had not expected this. When does the ship leave? She asked. Now. He led her to the observation deck on the upper level of the station. Through the transparent walls, she could see Earth below, and the scattered lights of human civilization on its night side. And she could see something else. Something was moving out there, in the darkness between the station and the moon. Something massive. At first, Tilla thought it was an asteroid. But then she saw lights activating along its surface, and she realized she was looking at the Thermopylae. It was even bigger than the hologram had suggested. As she watched, engine ports along its rear section began to glow with blue-white fire. The ship started to move, slowly at first, then faster, accelerating toward the stars. God help the Krath, Admiral Chen said quietly, standing beside her. Because humanity will show them none. Tilla watched the ship of legends disappear into the darkness, and for the first time in 8 months, she felt something she had almost forgotten: hope. The inside of the Thermopylae was a city. Tilla had expected a warship to feel cramped and utilitarian. Instead, she found herself walking through corridors wide enough for vehicles to pass, past recreation areas where off-duty crew members exercised and socialized, past hydroponic gardens that stretched for hundreds of meters and produced fresh food for the crew. Lieutenant Commander Sara Okonkwo walked beside her, serving as her guide. The young woman had dark skin and close-cropped hair, and she moved with the easy confidence of someone who knew every centimeter of the ship she served on. The Thermopylae was designed for extended operations, Sarah explained. We can stay in space for years without resupply. The crew rotates through duty shifts, but there are always at least 15,000 people awake and working at any given time. Tilla struggled to process the scale. Her entire government employed fewer people than this single ship. Why would you need a ship this large? She asked. Sarah gave her a look that Tilla could not quite interpret. Because when humanity builds something, we build it to last, and we build it to win. They reached a large observation window, and Tilla stopped walking. Outside, the stars stretched in every direction, distorted by the effects of faster-than-light travel. The ship was moving at speeds that would have taken her people decades to achieve, crossing the vast distance between human space and Valari territory in a matter of days. We will arrive at the Valari border in approximately 60 hours, Sarah said. Captain Vasquez has requested your presence on the bridge. She would like to discuss the tactical situation. The bridge of the Thermopylae was not what Tilla expected. Instead of a small room with a few officers, it was a massive chamber that reminded her of a theater. Hundreds of crew members sat at workstations arranged in tiers, monitoring systems that controlled every aspect of the ship's operations. Holographic displays filled the air with information, streams of data that moved too fast for Tilla to follow. At the center of it all stood Captain Elena Vasquez. She was a small woman by human standards, with gray-streaked black hair pulled back in a tight bun and lines around her eyes that spoke of years spent making difficult decisions. She wore a simple uniform without decoration, but something in the way she stood made it clear that she was in command. Ambassador Tilla, she said, her voice carrying easily across the bridge. Welcome to my ship. Thank you, Captain. It is impressive. Vasquez smiled slightly. She is the finest vessel humanity has ever built. I have commanded her for 11 years, and she has never let me down. She gestured to a holographic display that showed a star map of Valari space. Red markers indicated Krath fleet positions, and there were so many of them that they almost obscured the stars beneath. Our intelligence suggests that Krath have divided their forces, Vasquez said. Their vanguard fleet, approximately 2,000 ships, is currently consuming your colony worlds in the outer territories. Their main fleet, roughly 8,000 ships, is moving more slowly, harvesting populations and resources as they advance. We estimate the main fleet will reach your homeworld in approximately 3 weeks. Tilla felt sick. She had known the numbers, but seeing them displayed so clearly made the hopelessness of the situation impossible to ignore. How can one ship stop that? She asked. Vasquez looked at her for a long moment. One ship cannot stop that, Ambassador. Not permanently. But one ship can slow them down. One ship can make them bleed for every light year they advance. One ship can buy time for reinforcements to arrive. And how long will reinforcements take? 2 weeks for the nearest battle group. 4 weeks for the main fleet. Tilla did the math in her head. Even if the Thermopylae could somehow hold the Krath for 2 weeks, the main fleet would still arrive before adequate human forces could respond. You are asking your crew to die, she said quietly. I am asking my crew to fight, Vasquez corrected. What happens after that is beyond my control, but I can promise you this, Ambassador. Every man and woman on this ship knew what they were signing up for. Every single one of them volunteered. The captain walked to another display, this one showing the Thermopylae itself in technical detail. Tilla could see the weapons now. Arrays of railguns and missile tubes and energy projectors that covered the ship's surface like spines on a sea creature. Let me tell you what this ship can do, Vasquez said. Our main guns fire 3-ton projectiles at 1% of light speed. At that velocity, a single shot carries more energy than a nuclear weapon. We have 48 of these guns, and they can fire continuously for hours. She highlighted another section of the display. Our missile systems can launch 5,000 warheads simultaneously, each capable of independent targeting and maneuvering. Our point defense network can track and destroy incoming fire at a rate of 200 targets per second. Our shields can absorb impacts that would crack a small moon. Thyla stared at the display. She had never imagined weapons like these. Her people had believed that war was obsolete, that advanced civilizations had moved beyond such primitive concerns. Why? She asked. Why would humanity build such things? Vasquez was silent for a moment. Then she turned to face Thyla directly. Because we learned, Ambassador. We learned what happens when you are weak and something stronger decides it wants what you have. She walked to a section of the bridge where a large plaque hung on the wall. It was made of dark metal, and it bore thousands of names etched in small letters. Do you know what this is? Vasquez asked. Thyla shook her head. These are the names of everyone who died in the HFY War. 217 million human beings. They died because we were not ready. They died because we believed, like you, that intelligence and civilization would protect us from those who wanted to destroy us. The captain's voice hardened. We built the Thermopylae so that would never happen again. We built her so that when something dark came crawling out of the void, we would have an answer. And now that dark thing has come. Ambassador, the Krath are exactly the enemy we have been preparing for. Thyla looked at the names on the plaque. 217 million. Her people had lost 3 billion to the Krath, but she was beginning to understand that the number was less important than what came after. Her people had lost 3 billion and surrendered to despair. Humanity had lost 200 million and built a ship of legends. I would like to understand, she said slowly. What makes your soldiers different? Why do they fight when the odds are so hopeless? Vasquez considered the question. Have you ever heard of the Spartans? No. They were warriors from my world. Thousands of years ago, they lived in a small city, surrounded by enemies. From birth, they were trained to fight, not because they enjoyed violence, but because they understood that freedom requires defenders. She pointed to the image of the warrior painted on the Thermopylae's hull. That is a Spartan. The Battle of Thermopylae was their greatest moment. 300 of them held a narrow mountain pass against an army of hundreds of thousands. They knew they would die. They fought anyway. Their sacrifice gave their people time to prepare, and ultimately, to survive. Vasquez turned back to Thyla. Every soldier on this ship knows that story. They carry it in their hearts. When we named this ship Thermopylae, we were making a promise. We will hold the pass. We will buy the time. And if necessary, we will die so that others may live. Thyla felt something she could not name. It was not hope, exactly. It was something deeper, something that resonated in the core of her being. How do you teach someone to be willing to die? She asked. You don't, Vasquez said. You teach them what is worth dying for. Family, home, people who cannot protect themselves. When a soldier truly understands what they are protecting, they do not need to be taught courage. It comes naturally. An alert chimed softly, and one of the bridge officers looked up. Captain, long-range sensors are detecting Krath signatures. Approximately 500 ships, bearing 274 Mark 15. Vasquez nodded calmly. Time to intercept? 18 hours, ma'am. The captain turned to Thyla. It seems we will have our first engagement sooner than expected. I suggest you get some rest, Ambassador. The next few days will be difficult. Thyla wanted to argue, to stay and watch, but she could see the crew shifting into a higher state of readiness. Conversations became clipped and professional. The holographic displays began showing weapons, status, and tactical projections. As she left the bridge, she heard Vasquez addressing her crew over the ship's intercom. All hands, this is the captain. We have detected enemy forces ahead. In 18 hours, we will engage the Krath swarm in combat. I will not lie to you. The enemy outnumbers us. They do not feel fear. They do not surrender. But neither do we. There was a pause, and when Vasquez spoke again, her voice was like iron. Remember who you are. Remember what you fight for. Remember the name of this ship and what it means. Today, we stand for those who cannot stand for themselves. Today, we show the galaxy what humanity is made of. Thermopylae. From somewhere on the bridge, a voice responded. Thermopylae. Then another. Thermopylae. And then, spreading through the ship like fire, the word echoed from 45,000 throats. Thilla could hear it in the corridors, in the mess halls, in the engineering sections and weapons bays. A single word, repeated over and over, becoming a thunder that shook the walls. Thermopylae. 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 Thilla stood in the corridor, surrounded by humans chanting the name of an ancient battle. And she understood at last why humanity had survived the HFY War. It was not their weapons that made them dangerous. It was their willingness to use them. The Krath did not bother with warnings. Thilla watched from the observation deck as the enemy fleet appeared on the long-range displays. 500 ships, just as the sensors had predicted. They moved in a swarm pattern. No formation, no coordination that she could see. Just a mass of twisted metal shapes surging through space like a school of hungry fish. They are broadcasting on all frequencies, Lieutenant Commander Sarah said, standing beside her. But it is not communication. It is just noise. Screaming. Thilla listened. Her translator tried to process the sound and failed. It was not language. It was just hunger given voice. A shrieking cacophony that made her compound hearts race with instinctive terror. Why do they do that? She asked. We think it is psychological warfare. Or maybe it is just how they express excitement. Either way, it does not matter. We stopped listening to the Krath a long time ago. On the main display, the Thermopylae continued its steady approach. The ship had not changed course or slowed down. It was flying directly toward the enemy fleet, alone, broadcasting nothing but a simple identification signal. Captain Vasquez believes in making the first move, Sarah explained. She says that in combat, hesitation kills. Better to strike hard and fast than to wait for the enemy to set the terms. The distance between the fleets closed rapidly. Thilla could see the Krath ships more clearly now, and her fear deepened. They were ugly things, asymmetrical and organic-looking, covered with what appeared to be biological growth. Some of them were as large as the Thermopylae. Most were smaller, but there were so many of them. Weapons range in 30 seconds, a voice announced over the intercom. Thilla gripped the railing in front of her. She had never witnessed a space battle before. She did not know what to expect. 20 seconds. The Krath fleet began to spread out, individual ships accelerating toward the Thermopylae from multiple angles. They were trying to surround it, to attack from all directions at once. 10 seconds. Sarah placed a hand on Thilla's shoulder. You might want to hold on to something. Weapons free. The Thermopylae opened fire. Thilla had seen the technical specifications. She had heard Captain Vasquez describe the ship's weapons. None of it had prepared her for the reality. The railguns fired first. She could not see the projectiles themselves, but she could see the effect. Krath ships simply ceased to exist, transformed from solid objects into expanding clouds of debris and fire. The guns fired again and again, a continuous stream of destruction that carved paths through the enemy fleet. Then the missiles launched, thousands of them, pouring from launch tubes along the ship's flanks, spreading out in carefully calculated patterns. They accelerated toward the Krath at speeds that Thilla's mind could not process. When they hit, the explosions lit up space like a new constellation. 23 kills in the first salvo, a tactical officer reported. Enemy formation disrupted. They are scattering, but the Krath did not retreat. The surviving ships continued their charge, closing the distance to the Thermopylae with single-minded determination. They began to fire back, plasma weapons and kinetic impactors and missiles of their own. The Thermopylae's point defense network activated. Beams of light swept across space, intercepting incoming fire before it could reach the ship's shields. The few shots that made it through splashed against the shield barrier in bursts of dissipating energy. Shields holding at 94%, someone announced. Enemy fire, ineffective at current range. The battle continued. Minutes stretched into an hour, then 2. The Thermopylae moved through the Krath fleet like a predator through a school of prey, its weapons never stopping, its shields absorbing everything the enemy could throw at it. Thilla watched in horrified fascination. She had believed that war was primitive, that violence was the refuge of those who could not think of better solutions. Now she saw something different. She saw precision, coordination, and skill. Every shot from the Thermopylae hit its target. Every maneuver served a purpose. The humans were not fighting with rage or hatred. They were fighting with cold, calculated efficiency. How are they doing this? She asked Sarah. How can one ship defeat so many? Training, Sarah replied. Every member of this crew has spent years preparing for this moment. They have run thousands of simulations. They know exactly what to do in every situation. The Krath have numbers, but we have discipline. The display updated. 300 Krath ships destroyed, 200 remaining. The enemy fleet was being methodically dismantled. Then something changed. New signatures appeared on the sensors. More Krath ships, emerging from faster-than-light travel in a sphere around the battle zone. Not hundreds this time. Thousands. Contact, the tactical officer said, his voice suddenly tense. Multiple FTL exits detected. Counting. 2,300 additional enemy vessels. Captain Vasquez's voice came over the intercom, steady and calm. All hands, we have reinforcements inbound. Enemy reinforcements. This was a trap. The Vanguard fleet was bait to draw us in. Thilla felt her legs weaken. 2,000 ships. Plus the survivors of the original fleet. Against one. What do we do? She whispered. Sarah's face had gone hard. We fight. The Krath closed in from all directions. The Thermopylae's weapons continued firing, but now they were facing overwhelming numbers. For every ship destroyed, 2 more took its place. The point defense network struggled to intercept the increasing volume of incoming fire. Shields at 70%, someone reported. 65. 60. The first hit penetrated the shields. Thilla felt the ship shudder as kinetic impactors struck the hull. Alarms began to sound. Damage reports flooded the communication channels. Hull breach in Section 47. Emergency teams responding. Fire in the port engineering bay. Containment in progress. We have casualties on decks 12 through 14. But the Thermopylae did not stop fighting. Its guns continued to fire. Its missiles continued to launch. Even as damage accumulated, even as crew members died, the ship pressed on. Thilla watched as a Krath vessel managed to get close enough to ram. It struck the Thermopylae amidships, its hull crumpling against the human ship's armor. But the impact was not gentle. The observation deck shook violently, and Thilla was thrown to the floor. When she looked up, she saw that Sarah was bleeding from a cut on her forehead. The young woman did not seem to notice. She was helping Thilla to her feet with one hand while speaking into her communicator with the other. Observation deck secure. Minor injuries only. What is the status of the ramming impact? Armor held, came the reply. The Krath ship is embedded in our hull, but we are cutting it free. No critical damage. Hours passed. The battle continued. Thilla lost count of the Krath ships destroyed. Hundreds, certainly. Perhaps over 1,000. But more kept coming, drawn by the sounds of battle or simply following their swarm instincts. The Thermopylae was taking serious damage now. Entire sections had been sealed off, exposed to vacuum or consumed by fire. The shields were down to 20% and struggling to regenerate. Some of the weapons had gone silent, their crews dead or their systems destroyed. But the ship was still fighting. We cannot keep this up, Sarah said quietly. She was not speaking to Thilla, just thinking out loud. We are running low on missiles. The railgun capacitors are overheating. If they keep coming at this rate, we will be overwhelmed within 6 hours. Thilla looked at the young woman. Will you surrender? Sarah laughed, a sharp sound that held no humor. Ambassador, look around you. Do you see anyone preparing to surrender? Thilla looked. She saw human crew members at their stations, continuing to work despite injuries and exhaustion. She saw damage control teams rushing to repair critical systems. She saw medical personnel carrying wounded to the infirmary, never stopping, never slowing down. No one was giving up. No one was even considering it. Why? Thilla asked. Why do you keep fighting when you cannot win? Sarah turned to face her. There were tears in the young woman's eyes, but her voice was steady. Because if we stop, your people die. Because somewhere out there are Valari children who will never know about this battle, who will grow up and have families and live full lives because we stood here today, because that is what the name means. Ambassador, Thermopylae. We hold the line. An alert chimed. Sarah checked her communicator, and her expression changed. The Krath are pulling back. Thilla felt her heart surge with hope. They are retreating? No. They are regrouping. Their main fleet has arrived early. 8,000 additional ships. The hope died as quickly as it had appeared. 8,000, plus the survivors of the current battle. Against one crippled ship with failing shields and depleted weapons, Captain Vasquez's voice came over the intercom. All hands, this is the captain. The Krath main fleet has arrived. We are now facing approximately 8,000 enemy vessels. Our shields are at 18%. We have lost 31% of our weapons capability. 1,700 crew members are dead or wounded. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was the same calm, steady tone it had always been. I am not going to lie to you. The odds are not in our favor, but I want you to know something. In the past 12 hours, we have destroyed over 2,000 Krath ships. We have proven that they can be hurt. We have proven that they can be stopped. And we have bought time, 3 days of time, maybe more, for the Valari to prepare, for our reinforcements to get closer. Another pause. We are the Thermopylae. This is what we were built for. This is what we trained for. And this is what we will do. We will stand. We will fight. And we will make them pay for every inch they take. Thermopylae. From across the ship, the response came again. Quieter now, hoarse from hours of battle, but no less determined. Thermopylae. Thilla stood on the observation deck, watching the Krath main fleet emerge from faster-than-light travel. Thousands of ships, blotting out the stars, screaming their hunger into the void. And in front of them, battered but unbroken, stood one ship, carrying 45,000 humans who had chosen to die so that strangers might live. Thilla had never believed in gods, but in that moment, she prayed. The Thermopylae was dying. 3 days had passed since the main Krath fleet arrived. 3 days of constant battle, of damage accumulating faster than it could be repaired, of crew members dying at their stations and being replaced by others who knew they would likely share the same fate. Thilla had stopped counting the enemy ships destroyed. Thousands, certainly, perhaps 5,000 or more. But it was not enough. It was never enough. The ship's shields had failed completely on the second day. Now the hull itself was the only protection, and it was being torn apart piece by piece. Entire sections had been abandoned, sealed off to prevent further decompression. The weapons that still functioned fired in careful, rationed bursts, conserving the ammunition that was rapidly running out. And still the Krath came. Thilla found Captain Vasquez in the Auxiliary Command Center. The main bridge had been destroyed 6 hours ago, along with nearly everyone in it. Vasquez had survived only because she had been inspecting the forward weapons batteries when the plasma torpedo hit. The captain looked older than she had 3 days ago. Her uniform was stained with blood and burn marks. One of her arms was wrapped in bandages, and she moved with the careful slowness of someone managing significant pain. But her eyes were still clear, and her voice was still steady. "Ambassador," she said, "you should be in the protected areas with the other civilians. I wanted to speak with you." Thilla replied. Vasquez nodded and gestured to an empty seat. The Auxiliary Command Center was smaller than the main bridge, designed for emergency situations exactly like this one. Only a handful of officers remained, all of them showing signs of exhaustion and injury. "How long can we hold?" Thilla asked. "A few more hours. Maybe a day if we are lucky." Vasquez checked a display showing the ship's status. Red indicators dominated the screen. "Our main guns are down to 17% ammunition. The missile bays are empty. We are running on backup power in most sections." She turned to face Thilla directly. "But we have done what we came to do. We have bought time. The Krath fleet has been reduced by half. Our reinforcements are less than 2 days away. Even if we fall, the battle is not over." Thilla felt tears forming in her compound eyes. "Why did you come? You knew this would happen. You knew you would die." Vasquez was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft. "Let me tell you a story, Ambassador. When I was a child, my grandmother told me about her grandfather, who fought in a war on Earth. His unit was surrounded by the enemy. They had no hope of victory or rescue, but they held their position for 3 days, long enough for civilians to evacuate from a nearby city." She paused. "My grandmother asked him why he did not surrender. He said that some things are more important than survival. He said that when you choose to protect someone, you do not stop because the cost becomes too high. You stop when the job is done, or when you die." Those are the only acceptable endings. Captain Vasquez looked at the damage reports scrolling across her displays. I think about that story often. I think about what kind of person chooses to die for strangers, and I have come to understand that it is not really a choice at all. It is simply who they are, who we are. When we see someone in danger, something inside us demands that we act, not because we expect to win, not because we hope for reward, but because we cannot live with ourselves if we do nothing. An alarm sounded, and one of the officers looked up. Captain, the Krath are massing for another assault. Approximately 3,000 ships forming up at bearing 157. Vasquez stood, wincing as her injuries protested the movement. Sound battle stations. All remaining weapons. Prepare to engage. Thilla followed her to the tactical display. The Krath fleet was a massive swarm of red dots, surrounding the single blue point that represented the Thermopylae. It looked like blood cells attacking a foreign body. This may be the final engagement, Vasquez said quietly. They know we are weak. They will try to overwhelm us with one massive assault. The captain activated the ship-wide intercom. All hands, this is the captain. We have incoming. This is likely to be the big one. I want you to know that whatever happens in the next few hours, I am proud of every single one of you. We have held the line for 3 days against impossible odds. We have shown the galaxy what humanity stands for, and we have given the Volari a chance. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice cracked slightly. For those of you who have family waiting at home, I am sorry. I am sorry that I brought you here, to this place, knowing that many of you would not return. But I want you to know that your sacrifice means something. Somewhere, right now, there are children who will live because of what we have done. There are worlds that will not burn. There is a future that exists because we stood in the way of the darkness. The Krath fleet began to move. Thermopylae, Vasquez said. Thermopylae, came the response, weaker now, from fewer throats, but no less determined. The battle began. Thilla watched as the Krath swarmed toward the crippled ship. The Thermopylae's remaining weapons fired, but there were too few of them now. Enemy ships made it through the defensive fire, crashing into the hull, burning through armor, disgorging Krath soldiers into the ship's interior. Alarms sounded everywhere. The sounds of gunfire and explosions echoed through the corridors. Human soldiers fought hand-to-hand against the insectoid invaders, defending every bulkhead, every corridor, every room. They are inside the ship, someone reported. Multiple breaches on decks 7 through 12. Seal off the reactor sections, Vasquez ordered. If they reach the main power core, they can destroy us from within. Thilla felt helpless. She was not a warrior. She could not fight. All she could do was watch as the humans died defending her people. Then something appeared on the sensors. Contact, the tactical officer said, confusion in his voice. Multiple new signatures approaching. They are not Krath. Vasquez looked at the display. Identify. Ma'am, they are Volari ships. Hundreds of them, no, thousands. Thilla felt her heart stop. It was impossible. The Volari had no warships. They had no military. They were pacifists who had not fought a war in 6,000 years. But there they were, thousands of ships emerging from faster-than-light travel, surrounding the battlefield in a sphere of blinking lights. Mining vessels, cargo haulers, passenger transports, personal yachts. Every ship the Volari could gather, armed with improvised weapons and crewed by civilians who had never fired a shot in their lives. Ambassador, Vasquez said, turning to Thilla. What is this? Thilla was crying. She could not stop. They came. My people came. A communication signal appeared on the display. Thilla recognized the caller identification immediately. It was High Counselor Vithis, the leader of the Volari hegemony. She accepted the call. Vithis appeared on the screen, his compound eyes reflecting the lights of what appeared to be a ship's bridge. He was wearing armor, crude and ill-fitting, clearly improvised from industrial equipment. Ambassador Thilla, he said, we have been watching the battle from long-range sensors. We have seen what the humans have done for us. He paused, and his voice filled with emotion. We are not warriors. We do not know how to fight, but we can learn. And we will not let these humans die alone. The Volari fleet engaged the Krath. It was chaos. The civilian ships had no coordination, no tactics, no training. They flew straight at the enemy, firing their improvised weapons with more enthusiasm than accuracy. Krath ships destroyed dozens of them in the first minutes of combat, but there were thousands of Volari ships, and they did not stop coming. The Krath were caught between two forces now, the damaged but still dangerous Thermopylae in front of them, and the massive swarm of Volari ships behind. They tried to turn, to reorient their formation, but the surprise had disrupted their coordination. Thilla watched as a Volari mining vessel rammed directly into a Krath battleship. The mining vessel was destroyed instantly, but its mass and velocity carried it through the enemy hull, crippling the larger ship. Other Volari followed suit, sacrificing themselves to take down enemies they could not destroy any other way. "They are dying," Thilla whispered. "My people are dying." "Yes," Vasquez said softly. "They are. But they are fighting, for the first time in 6,000 years. Your people are fighting." The battle raged for hours. The Volari took horrific casualties, losing hundreds of ships for every Krath vessel they destroyed. But they did not retreat. They did not surrender. They kept coming, wave after wave, ordinary civilians who had decided that they would rather die fighting than live as prey. And slowly, impossibly, the tide began to turn. The Krath had expended much of their strength against the Thermopylae. They had expected easy prey, not a second enemy fleet. They had no strategy for dealing with thousands of small ships that attacked without fear or hesitation. The swarm began to falter. Then new signatures appeared on the sensors. Human signatures this time. "The second fleet," Vasquez breathed. "They made it." 30 human warships emerged from faster-than-light travel, their weapons already firing. They cut through the Krath formation like knives through paper, their advanced weapons and trained crews carving paths of destruction through the disorganized enemy. At their head flew two ships, the UES Marathon and the UES Stalingrad. Each was nearly as large as the Thermopylae, and together they brought enough firepower to match the entire remaining Krath fleet. The Krath broke. For the first time in their history, the swarm fled. They scattered in every direction, abandoning their attack, abandoning their prey, running for the dark spaces between stars. The battle was over. Thilla stood in the auxiliary command center, surrounded by exhausted humans and flickering displays, and she wept. She wept for the thousands of her people who had died in their improvised warships. She wept for the 1,700 humans who had given their lives aboard the Thermopylae. She wept for the end of 6,000 years of peace, but she also wept with joy. Her people had found their courage. They had learned to fight, and they had done it because one ship, crewed by 45,000 humans, had shown them what it meant to stand against the darkness. Captain Vasquez placed a hand on her shoulder. "It is not over," the captain said. "The Krath will regroup. They will come back. This was just one battle in what will be a long war." Thilla looked at her, at this small human woman who had held the line against an empire with nothing but courage and determination. "Then we will fight them together," Thilla said. "And we will teach them what happens when you threaten those we love." Vasquez smiled, and for the first time since the battle began, there was hope in her eyes. "Welcome to the war, Ambassador." 1 year had passed since the Battle of Kethos 4. Thilla stood on the observation platform of the Volari orbital shipyard, watching the ceremony below. Thousands of Volari citizens had gathered in the central plaza, their compound eyes reflecting the brilliant lights that illuminated the event. Hundreds of human diplomats and military officers stood among them, their uniforms a stark contrast to the flowing robes of her people. And above them all, floating in the construction cradle that had been its home for the past 8 months, was the newest addition to the Volari fleet, the VHS Thermopylae. It was smaller than its human namesake, only 4 kilometers long, but it was beautiful in a way that Thilla had never expected a weapon of war to be. Its hull gleamed with polished alloy, and its weapons arrays caught the light like jewelry. It was the first true warship the Volari had ever built, designed with human assistance but constructed entirely by Volari hands. It was a symbol, a promise, a declaration that the galaxy would never again see the Volari as prey. High Counselor Vethis stood at the podium, his voice carrying across the plaza through amplified speakers. 1 year ago, we were a dying people. The Krath had destroyed 17 of our worlds. They had harvested 3 billion of our citizens. We had no weapons, no warriors, no hope. We sent an ambassador to the humans, begging for help, expecting nothing but polite refusal. He paused, and his compound eyes found Thyla in the crowd. Instead, they sent the Thermopylae. The crowd was silent. Everyone remembered. Everyone had lost someone. The humans could have ignored us. They had no treaty obligations, no strategic interest, no reason to risk their lives for a species they barely knew. But they came anyway. They sent their finest ship and their bravest warriors to stand between us and the darkness. And when they realized they could not win, when they faced certain death, they did not run. They did not surrender. They held the line. Vethus's voice grew stronger. 1,700 humans died aboard the Thermopylae that day. 1,700 people who had families waiting for them at home. 1,700 people who would never see their children grow up, never hold their loved ones again, never grow old in peace. They gave everything they had so that strangers might live. He gestured to the ship floating above the plaza. This vessel bears their name. It is our promise that their sacrifice was not in vain. It is our declaration that the Valari will never again be helpless. And it is our tribute to the species that taught us that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to fight despite it. A sound began to build in the crowd. At first, Thyla did not recognize it. Then she realized that her people were chanting, thousands of voices joining together in a single word. Thermopylae, Thermopylae, Thermopylae. The word echoed off the walls of the shipyard, filling the air with its meaning. Hold the line. Stand against the darkness. Protect those who cannot protect themselves. After the ceremony, Thyla found Captain Vasquez near the edge of the plaza. The human woman looked different now. Her injuries had healed, leaving scars that would never fade. She wore a new uniform bearing the insignia of a rear admiral, and her eyes held something that had not been there before. Peace. Admiral Vasquez, Thyla said, using the woman's new rank. Thank you for coming. Vasquez smiled. I would not have missed this. It is not every day that a pacifist species launches its first warship. They walked together along the observation corridor, looking out at the stars. The Krath are rebuilding, Vasquez said. Our intelligence suggests they will be ready for another major offensive within 2 years. They have not forgotten their defeat, and they want revenge. Thyla nodded. She had seen the reports. The swarm was gathering in the dark spaces between stars, breeding and building, preparing for a war that would dwarf the first one. We will be ready, she said. The Valari Defense Force now has 140 warships, with more under construction every month. We have training academies teaching our young people how to fight. We have factories producing weapons that would have horrified us a year ago. She paused. Sometimes I wonder if we have lost something important. For 6,000 years, we believed that violence was primitive, that civilized beings should resolve their conflicts through reason and diplomacy. Now we are building weapons of mass destruction. Are we becoming the very thing we feared? Vasquez considered the question carefully before responding. Ambassador, do you know why humanity builds weapons? Because you are afraid. Yes, but not just afraid of being attacked. We are afraid of being unable to protect those we love. A weapon is not just a tool for killing, it is a tool for defending. The sword that strikes down an invader is the same sword that shields a child from harm. She turned to face Thyla. You have not lost your compassion. You have not abandoned your values. You have simply learned that sometimes, protecting the innocent requires strength. The Valari who died at Kethos 4. The civilians who strapped mining lasers to their ships and flew into battle against impossible odds. They were not warriors. They were parents and teachers and artists and farmers who decided that they would rather die fighting than watch their people be consumed. Vasquez placed a hand on Thyla's shoulder. That is not primitive. That is love. That is the deepest, most powerful expression of civilization there is. The willingness to sacrifice yourself for others. The courage to stand against the darkness even when you know you cannot win. That is what makes a species great. Not their weapons, not their technology, not their territory, their heart. Thyla felt tears forming in her compound eyes. Is that what you felt when you held the line against the Krath, knowing you would die? Yes, I felt love. For my crew, who trusted me to lead them. For the Valari, who had no one else to protect them. For humanity, and the values we try to represent. I was terrified, Ambassador. I was certain I was going to die. But I was not sad, because I knew that my death would mean something, that somewhere, someone would live because I had chosen to fight. They walked in silence for a while, watching the stars slowly wheel past the observation windows. The war is not over, Thilla finally said. The Krath will return. There will be more battles, more death, more sacrifice. Yes, there will be, but there is something different now, something the Krath did not expect. Vasquez smiled. Legends are contagious, Ambassador. You watched one ship stand against an empire, and you found your own courage. Now the galaxy is watching you. Other species, other civilizations. They are seeing what the Valari have become. They are learning that even the gentlest people can become warriors when they have something worth fighting for. She gestured out at the stars. The Krath think they are fighting a war of conquest. They do not understand that they have started something much bigger. They have united two species who were strangers. They have forged an alliance built on blood and sacrifice and shared courage. And they have shown the galaxy that the darkness can be beaten. Tilla looked at the human woman, at this small creature from a small world who had changed the course of history. What happens next? We prepare, we train, we build, and when the Krath come, we meet them together. Not as two species fighting separately, but as one force, one alliance, one promise. Vasquez looked back at the VHS Thermopylae, floating majestically in its construction cradle. The real victory was never about destroying the Krath. It was about proving that they can be fought, that the galaxy does not have to cower in fear, that when the darkness comes, there are those who will stand against it. She turned to Thilla one last time. We showed you what it means to be human, and you showed us that our courage could inspire others. That is the legacy of the Thermopylae. Not a ship, not a battle, but an idea. The idea that ordinary people can become heroes, that strangers can become family, that the light can hold back the darkness, if only enough people are willing to carry it. Tilla thought about the year that had passed. The battles fought, the lives lost, the transformations undergone. Her people had changed forever. They would never again be the innocent pacifists they had been, but they had gained something precious, the knowledge that they could defend themselves, that they were not helpless, that they had the strength to protect what they loved. When the Krath return, she said, they will not find the same galaxy they left behind. They will find warriors. They will find defenders. They will find legends. She looked up at the ship that bore the name of human sacrifice, and she felt pride swelling in her hearts. And they will learn what we have learned, that when you threaten those we love, we do not run, we do not hide, we stand, we fight, we hold the line. Admiral Vasquez nodded, and there were tears in her eyes. Thermopylae, Thermopylae, Thilla repeated. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, the Krath continued to breed and build and plan their revenge. But they did not know what was waiting for them. They did not know that their prey had become predators. They did not know that the legends they had created would be their downfall. They would learn. The galaxy would teach them.